Here's a fun little project. It's a bird brooch, but you could do any shape you like. I've just decided to do this particular brooch. You can see a dragonfly would work, and I've got a dragonfly tutorial. You could just do a circular brooch and then wire in lots of beads to match your outfit. You could do something like this, a spiral with twisted sort of beaded rays coming out, a shell, anything goes. But we're going to start with the bird. So I'm cutting about 12 inches of 0.8 millimeter 20 gauge wire, and I'm folding it. It's approximately in half, squeezing the doubled end together, and then I'm going to just open it up so that it becomes like a little sort of V shape, and that will be the beak of the bird. Then using my thumb, I'm just going to make the head and then push it down to make the slope of the back, and then to come up, and there's the front of the bird and the sort of stomach, and then where the wires cross over will be the back feathers. So it's a very, very simplified silhouette. So you wrap one wire around the other to secure the frame, and that's really how simple it is. If you find you want to draw the outline out and then use that as a guide for your wire, please do that. You can find silhouettes and frames online. So with the projecting ends, I'm going to make 2 spirals that will sort of be the back feathers. You don't have to do spirals, you could do a more sort of feathered look with loops, but I just love spirals. I just think they're incredibly decorative. So I'm just going to finish off the ends like this. So I start them as open spirals and then bring the wire in and close it up to tighten it up, and that means that as a brooch, it won't, if it's too open, it might get caught on things. So that's why I started open, but then I bring the wire sort of closed afterwards near the tip of the frame. Once you've done that, you want to work harden the outer frame. So you get your planishing head of your whammer hammer and just stroke hammer the whole outer edge. Try and avoid the crossed over bits at the back where the feather sort of spirals come out, because you don't want to weaken the crossover. So just hammer the rest of it, because you're going to be weaving beads inside it, so you want the frame to be solid. And then you can also hammer the spirals, just separate them for a bit while you hammer. You don't want to hammer one spiral on top of the other, and that will make the frame nice and sturdy. So now we've got a frame. We can sort of play with the, adjust it later a little bit. So the next thing is the eye. So I've chosen quite a large bead for the eye. You can choose any size or any color you want, and I've cut about 5 or so inches, and I'm going to feed that bead on about 3/4 of a way down and take the longest end and wrap it around until it comes back around to where it was threaded, and that completely surrounds then the bead and frames it and gives it a nice outline. So once you've pushed that wire around and it sort of frames it tightly, you can position it where you want to connect it to the frame. So you've got these 2 ends, I've actually used too much wire, but it's always better to have a little bit too much, because it's difficult to wrap it around and connect it when you've got a very short end. So you can see I can just bring it around. Don't do too many wraps because otherwise it gets very bulky. So just one complete wrap and then squeeze the very sort of tip and that cut end around the top of the frame, and then bring the other side to position it where you want it to sit. So it's sort of, it should sit, it's like it's floating in that head space of the bird. So again, not too many wraps, just one complete wrap, and then cut it off, and then squidge down any leftover projecting wire. Make sure it's tight. So you need a bit of patience. Don't rush this project because it's all a bit fiddly, and if you try and make it quickly, you'll have disasters. So we've got the eye in place, and you can see I've selected my colours. Oh, hello Leo. Leo's my cat, and you can see he's found out I'm making a bird, so he's very interested. So we've got 24 gauge for the weaving. That's 0.4 mil. Any thin binding wire will do. I'm using copper just so that it matches the frame, and it's easier to start where the spiral tips of the feathers are. So just thread it in and around there, and then you can start beading within that frame. So depending on the space within and the shape and everything, you're going to make rows and rows of seed beads or bugle beads or any beads that you have to hand. And I'm just going to make some lines of these sort of purpley ones. I'm doing transparent purple and an opaque purple just to give a little sort of shading difference. So when you make a row, and before you start the next row, make sure you wrap about 4 times around the frame to create a gap before you feed the next row of beads. So you've always got to sort of provide that little gap and or space between the next row so that the rows sit one next to the other, next to the other. Now I've got a bit of a problem because Leo, my cat, you might see his paw coming in. He's very interested in what I'm doing, and we could have a disaster. I don't know. If he's in the mood, he will definitely play with the beads or get hold of the end of the wire. So I'm going to try and continue and just hope I don't have to stop filming with a disaster. So as you can see, I'm just making rows and rows and filling in that inner space, just like colouring in. And every time I'm wrapping, oh, Leo, what are you up to? He's definitely interested in the bird, isn't he? It's definitely, and I think it is the end of the wire. Here we go. I think we could have a big drama in a minute. So I'm wrapping and wrapping around the frame. Oh my goodness. Sorry about that. I've come back, I've reorganized myself. Leo is gone to have some food, and I'm hoping we'll be safe, cat safe from now on, and I hope this bird survives. So as you saw, I was making these rows of beads, and I'm actually using some of the darker beads now. And the reason for that is I wanted to give an impression of a wing taking shape in my beaded area. So do you see how I'm sort of increasing that darkened area there, and that will be the sort of the tip of a wing. Otherwise, you could actually make another copper frame with the 0.8 and then wire it onto the beaded area as a wing. So it gives a sort of much more of a two-dimensional effect. But I'm just going to do this all with beads. I want to keep it as simple as possible and not make it too complicated. So I'm carrying on with this darkened area where the wing is, and you can see I'm sort of making like a triangle effect, increasing or shaping it really with the beads. But you can do whatever you want. You might want to do a multicolored bird, or you could see how you could do this for a robin for Christmas with the using different colors for the redbreast, for instance. So carry on with filling this gap. And I know it's a bit fiddly and laborious. So I've zoomed ahead to show you I've run out of wire now. So I'm just finishing off that bit, cutting it off, and I'll show you how I introduce a new wire to continue my beading. So you can see how the wing has taken shape with a different color. So here's my new piece of wire. I've just cut along another long piece. In fact, I better get rid of this, the other end of the wire that I was using before I introduce my new one. Instead of cutting it off, which I would normally do actually, I'm decided, because I've got just enough to do this, I'm going to spiral that little bit and make a tiny little spiral that will sit over the wrapped area by the feather wings, and it just adds it hides the wrap, and it adds another little bit of decoration. So always thread it in to the previous row, and that anchors it in, secures it in, and then come to the front where you want to continue your beading, and then you do exactly as you were doing, picking up the colors that you're working on, and put enough beads that will go to the opposite side of the frame. So it's very relaxing, obviously, because it's not difficult, this bit. I mean, this is the sort of project you could do. You could make the framework and then give it to, a child, grandchild to do the beading, and then finish off, the rest of it. But the beading bit is not hard. So I'm moving the wire on. When it comes to a curve like this, you've got to do quite a few binds to get it to come up to the, the space that you want it to be for the next bit of beading. So, I mean, you could leave bigger gaps than me. I'm keeping it quite neat because I always think if you can see the workings, then they are part of the, the design really. And so if you keep them as neat as you can, it just, makes it part of the piece. So now I'm nearly there to put on a few more beads. So I'm going to pick up the next color. And now I'm going to reach the eye. It's the wire just around the eye bead. I could go behind the eye and then to the top of the head, but by doing this, attaching it to the base of that eye, that wire around the eye, it secures that wire in place as well to the frame. This is what I like about wire work. There are no rules. I mean, I'm doing this only because this is what's coming into my head now and it just makes sense. But if I made another design, I would do something else. And there are no rules, honestly. This is just to give you inspiration if you wanted to do something like this. But make it your own. Don't feel that you have to do it like me at all. I often make these sort of little designs for the front of greetings cards. You know, you can put it on the front of a card and it says, "A little birdie told me," and then inside that it's your birthday or something, you know, and it's a nice little motif for a greetings card. So we're getting to the end of the beading, just about, and the last bit of wiring will go across where the little beak is, and that will be the final bit of wiring. But no, none of the wire is wasted. I mean, whatever I cut off from this and is left over, I can use it, because I'm going to put little legs on this bird, so I can use it to wire on the legs. Right, so let's cut off that wire, the weaving wire. We've done all our weaving. And make sure also we've got, as the other end of the weaving wire is still there, I need to make sure that that is also trimmed. So I'm just going to pull it out and push it back in and tighten it, and then cut that off. So there's your beading. Now we're going to do the legs. So I've cut about 6 inches, and I'm going to make a little loop, tiny little loop on one side, then another loop that goes around the first loop, and then another one. I'm doing 3 little toes. You don't have to do these legs, but I find it's got quite a cartoon sort of fun quality to the bird having legs. So now bend up the wire from the middle to create the leg. So it's got basically 3 little toes. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It's just more for the, you know, the fun of it. And then I'm making a space and then making 3 more little toes. So little loops, 1, and then again. It really, there is no, you know, way of doing this. It's just 3 sausage sausage fingers. That's what it looks like. And you want to keep them as small as possible because the bird, the brooch is quite small. So I'm squeezing them together because they're going quite big now. I am tending to rush this a bit now, but take your time, do it neater than me. This is just to give you a sort of an idea of what you can do. So there's 3 more little toes, and I'm just going to wrap the excess wire around the top of the foot and get my cutters and cut that bit off. So these have to be wired on, obviously, and I've still got that little bit of weaving wire left which I can use for that. I'm just making sure that cut end is not going to stick out too much. There we have it, cartoon feet. So I'm going to get that weaving wire. I find it easier just to connect the wire firstly to the legs. So I've got it attached, then bring it to the frame and poke it through the base of the beaded area, and then I can wire it on to the base of that frame. So I'm just doing, it's like, you know, a few little stitches really. It's like sewing, isn't it? Stitching it on. I mean, everything is so light with wire that you don't need to over bind. But obviously, because you can see everything, you can see all your bindings, you want it to be as neat as possible. So I'm going to work, you noticed I always work with a length from the middle, and that means I've got two ends to work with, one going in one direction and one going the other. So the legs are on. I'm just going to give the toes a little bit of a stroke hammer to harden them. Don't want to bash them too much, otherwise they spread and get even bigger. And just make sure they might open up. So just make sure they're closed. And you can also give them a little bit of shaping with, I don't know if you've got a bail maker like that, it just curls them around a little bit. It's completely optional. Don't need to do that. So there's the bird, but we could just do the beak, fill in the beak. So I've got some nail varnish, some red nail varnish, and it's a bit like using resin. Because that little area for the beak is so small, the nail varnish is just going to hold within that space. So you just put a bit on with the brush and let it dry. And there you've got a bird with lipstick. So we only need to fit the brooch pin now, and then we're done. So here's my brooch pin. I'm using the same weaving wire again, the 0.4 mil. And when I put a brooch pin on, I always put the wire on the brooch pin, get it completely secure on my brooch pin finding first. Because if I hold it to the piece and then try and wire it on, you'll use twice as much wire and it gets messy and bulky. So first of all, go back through a couple of times to make sure the wire is completely on and secured on your brooch finding and sticking out in the right direction, because you're going to wire it on and you want your pin obviously to be sitting outside. So once it's on, hold the back of the brooch up and post the ends of the wires from the brooch finding through the from the back to the front, and then you're just going to attach it by binding it over a couple of the beads and back through those gaps on the, you know, the brooch finding has 3 holes in it to attach it, so I can quite easily bind it through. I mean, you will see a little bit of wire from the front, and you just have to pull it through as much as you can to make it disappear in between the gaps of the beads. That's, you know, the best you can do, because it's actually the wing there, it doesn't really matter. So you're basically securing it on and it grips over those beads, and you do that until you feel it secure. Because it's secure on the brooch pin, it doesn't need that many bindings. I mean, you'll feel when it's done. So now to hide the brooch pin, what I do, I've cut a piece of felt. I'm just marking where the hinge of the pin is and the little locking bit of the pin as well. So I fold that in half and just cut little slits, tiny little slits, which means that I can post that bit of felt over that brooch pin and hide it. And what I will do is I will glue it as well. I'll lift it up, put some glue, and then, so I've glued it now. I've absolutely glued the felt to the back, and all I have to do now is cut around the outline. So I've obviously got to do the pin up, otherwise I'm going to stab myself, not for the first time. And then use my small scissors just to cut around the whole outline. So you'll probably have to cut sort of once and then trim off any sort of furry bit, especially as it's felt. I mean, you might have some faux leather, you know, fake leather, or some suede or something like that you could glue instead of felt. I just happen to have this piece of felt that went so well, you know, with the colours. So I decided to use it. But whatever you've got to hand that you can. And if you don't really have to do this, this is just to neaten up the back. It means you don't see the back workings, and it just adds a bit of finish to the back. So I'm just going to trim off any bits that might be showing from the front. So just spend your time neatening it all up until you're happy with it. And that's really basically it. And you can see if you put it onto the back of a card, you could then tape it to another piece of felt and then glue it onto a greetings card and make a brooch and a card all in one. So this is another brooch I made earlier, a circular one. These are others, totally different designs that you might be inspired by as well. So do have fun making a brooch. I hope it inspires you. Thanks for watching.